Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and today we have a new version of Kerbal Space Program released, and the major feature is now Steam Workshop integration, which really marks a change. The team for a long time had tried to avoid making any concessions towards a particular store, but on the other hand, Kerbal Space Program for a long time had been really needing a good way to share stuff, and Steam is kind of the biggest game it is about games, so yeah, now there is Steam Workshop support. You can export spacecraft to Steam, or you can download them, and there's like 2,000 spacecraft already. You can't do mods at this time. You can do missions, and I'll show you some of those later. But yeah, look, we have some nice person that's built a helicopter. Yeah, you know, this is a turbine-driven helicopter. I don't know if you know how these things work. I've never quite been able to do this well, but people with much more time than myself. It's really quite interesting. Inside here, you have a bunch of, these are atmospheric fluid experiments, and those are essentially getting pushed around by these jet engines that will accelerate it in the correct direction. But of course, it's much easier to show you. Yeah, if you've got the game on Steam, you can find this. It's pretty easy. And all you need to do is press staging button to release the free-flowing propellers. Press action group 1 through 4 to select your power level. Throttle up to 100%. And, well, this is 25% thrust or 25% energy. And we're not going anywhere yet, because I haven't selected enough power. Let's try 50%. And unfortunately, we're torquing in the wrong direction. That could be a problem. Okay, no, this is definitely a problem. Lift up. No. I can't believe this. There it goes. Oh, I knew it was going to start happening. Wow, yeah, this is why you don't let me fly helicopters. I'm going to say that explosion looks surprisingly Hollywood to me. Normally explosions of things in Kerbal Space Program aren't nearly so spectacular, but wow. Oh, there it is. Look, you can see the engine still spinning that thing around there. Look, see how this thing spins? It spins because of science. Science experiments getting pushed around by jet engines. She lifts! She lifts! There it goes! Excellent, now we are airborne. Honestly, I am always impressed by people that manage to make rotorcraft in Kerbal Space Program, because it's really not designed for it. And this, more than anything, just demonstrates how Kerbal Space Program vehicles are essentially a bunch of individual parts flying in very close formation. Now, I wonder how far I can take this thing. So there are little jet engines on this, and they're enabled through Action Group 5. And I think I'm starting to get some control here. Look at how it's moving here. Oh, a little bit of strobing there makes the rotor blades sometimes seem to stand still or even rotate backwards. But we all know the truth is that the physics is being calculated one way or another. There we go. Making a bit of a turn now. If you actually look in close to the tail, you'll see that the tail is being driven by thermometers being pushed around by another jet engine. It's rather beautiful, if you ask me. As it happens, this stock design will actually be able to get me all the way to the island. Obviously, I'm doing this this post-commentary right now because this is running at 4 times regular speed, and I was concentrating something terrible to try and make this stay in the same rotation. One of the problems with flying rotorcraft like this is that there's a lot of angular momentum in those rotor blades, and if you try to roll in one direction, it will inevitably create a pitch or a yaw or something else. So it takes a lot of effort to control this thing. But yes, indeed, on my first real flight, rather than that first aborted explosive flight, I was in fact able to land it successfully at the island airfield. Woo! Successful landing! I totally did not expect that would work. My hat goes off to the designer of this. Anyway, yeah, they've made it so easy to push stuff to the workshop that there's already like 2,000 items in there. A lot of aircraft, a lot of variations on aircraft. I think a lot of people keep reposting the same design as they iterate on it. And it's just a shame that this isn't currently available on any other platform, in particular the consoles. And yeah, this does mean that I've gone and posted the missions and the stuff that I made for the 2001 anniversary. So you can fly those. It's a whole lot easier now than, say, getting them via Google Drive. And I have posted a challenge in the form of Hydraulic Disaster. So this is a mission that requires the Making History DLC, and it starts you inside a steer wing aircraft. The steer wing is a nice, reliable passenger and cargo aircraft, and the goal of this mission is to take off, and then after a couple of minutes, turn around and land the thing. And you might think, oh, that's pretty easy. I've landed aircraft before. Well, there's a little twist to this. Once you've got yourself in the skies and are ready to take on the world, Valentina realizes, well, they've lost all control of the aircraft. No flaps will work, no reaction wheels will work. The thing is basically a ballistic missile flying through the skies, and you might think that would probably doom your average aircraft, but the truth is this has actually happened in the past on at least 2 occasions, and the crew were able to survive it. And Bob is explaining that we still have engine throttle control, so the idea is that you're supposed to manually control the throttle, and you can adjust the throttle individually to each engine. So by reducing the throttle on one side, what you'll do is you will slow that side down, which means the wing will drop, which means it will roll towards that side. So you get a little bit of yaw control, a little bit of roll control, and from that, the question is, can you land it? And you know, it is a really, really hard process, because if you think about how this works, when you adjust the throttle on your engines, you're basically increasing or decreasing the amount of fuel. So the engine then begins to spin up faster and faster, or slower and slower. So there is a lag between you adjusting the fuel input and the amount of thrust changing. But then that will then change your speed, and then as your speed reaches, you know, a certain rate, you will either begin to pitch up or pitch down. So you're like 2 or 3 degrees away removed from your pitch control. First flight, I ended up too high. Second attempt, I came in lower, and you kept on having to zoom the camera out because I realized that there's a ridge between me and the runway. And yeah, as I basically came in, realized I was off center, I was gonna hit the building, so I wobbled around all over the place in a terrible pilot-induced oscillation and headed back out for another pass. On my third attempt, I had got lower than ever because I kept on finding I was too high. Of course, on the very first turn to approach, I then realized, oh wait, there's a bridge in the way, so I had to throttle up to get over this thing. We're now only running this at 4 times regular speed, so we're a little closer to reality, but yeah, I was cutting this pretty fine. I felt like fighter jets skimming the desert surface, except that I didn't have any control over these things. So yeah, this is actually, it's very close to a particular flight out of Iraq where a DHL cargo aircraft was attacked by a shoulder-launched missile, and it basically clipped the end of the wing and caused all their hydraulic fluid to drain out, which means, yeah, they didn't have any control of their flaps. Apparently they did have trim tab control, so that helped just a little. But yeah, they had 2 engines, and the majority of the flight was controlled by adjusting thrust from one engine to the other. There's also the more famous case of a United 232 where a DC-10, it's a tail engine, the turbine disc ruptured and the shrapnel came out and shattered their entire hydraulic system, so they were flying on 2 engines. They had a guy that was it was a passenger that happened to also be a flight trainer, and he sat down between the pilot and the co-pilot and worked the throttles to the landing. And it's simultaneously a miracle and a tragedy, because while they did get it on the ground, it then broke up. And so yes, people killed, but hey, more people survived because of the actions of the crew. Me, I did end up coming down close, and then I realized I'd, overthrusted, how it was said that you're several degrees removed from the actual performance, or the actual attitude. I got it on the ground, but man, that did not look like a smooth landing. Nevertheless, landed pretty much parallel to the runway, and I will take that. According to the rules of the scenario, this gives me 10,000 points. If I ditch in the water, that's 1,000 points. If I crash, that's no points. But if you get it on the runway, That's 1 million points. Why? Because I can. Seriously though, if anybody pulls that off, I would love to see video of it. Of course, you know, this is Kerbal, and it's actually quite fun to take someone else's well-crafted spacecraft and just, you know, slam it into the atmosphere at re-entry speeds and, you know, see how it falls apart and see whether the crew can survive. Anyway, while this mighty creation is falling apart, I think I probably should stop for a minute, and yeah, the most common thing people are asking me is, what about that EULA and what about these spyware things? And I'm saying, listen, in my humble opinion, pretty much everything has been blown out of proportion by people that, you know, for various motives. I mean, obviously there was the review bombing because of the Chinese translation changes, and I think that was a bit petty and stupid. And yes, both the forum and the game had to have their legalese updated because, hey, now it's Take-Two, it's a big company, they have lawyers and they want the language to be, you know, ironclad. There were some language changes basically about please don't reverse engineer our product, and there were some, you know, hysterical claims that this would stop all mod development. And of course it hasn't. I mean, the game devs were continuing to add new mod bindings while people on the forums were calling the modding for Kerbal Space Program dead. As someone that's worked in InfoSec, I wouldn't call Red Shell spyware because, you know, spyware for me is something that steals all your browser pages and passwords and files and tries to avoid getting uninstalled. Red Shell is more like a metrics interface for collecting data on user plays. And look, they've taken it out, so yeah, chill out, don't worry. And if you really are concerned about data collection, then you should probably not be complaining on platforms like Facebook or Google or YouTube, because guess what? That's how those companies make their money. The game is still far from perfect. The sky, however, is not falling, but I think the game is actually better than ever. I'm glad the team is continuing to develop as an ongoing property. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.